and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Now, this week's episode, we will be looking at the horror novel that is Carrie, written by Stephen King. Now, it was published in 1974, and although there are three adaptations of the book that I know of, I will be focusing solely on the original that was released in 1976. Now, as I said, there are two other versions, 2002 and 2013, but I will not be looking at those in this episode. Now, obviously, we will be looking at the five major things that we always compare on. So we're looking at character representation, we'll be looking at setting, we'll be looking at plot, and we'll be looking at if it stands in its own right, and of course, the overall how well the film has taken from the book. Now, as I do say in every episode, there will be spoilers. I will be discussing, obviously, the film and the book in its entirety. So if you have not read the book, if you have not seen the film, if you do not know what happens, please switch off, but do come back and have a look once you have read or watched the narratives. So as usual, we will be looking at character representation first. Now, as I said, there are loads of characters, but I will be looking at 7 of the major characters. So we'll be looking at, of course, we'll be looking at Carrie. We'll be looking at her very religiously driven mother, Margaret. We'll be looking at the two main women, the protagonists, the Chris and Sue. We'll be looking at their partners, Tommy and Billy. And we will be looking at Miss Desjardins. I think that's how you say her name. I apologise. I'm probably going to say it wrong throughout this entire episode. So if I am saying it wrong, do let me know. Now, the main character in the book, Carrie, she is someone that you do feel sorry for. She's brought up by a very religious woman, and the whole point that the way it starts in the film is because she starts her woman cycle. And by doing so, she doesn't realise that this is something that comes all naturally to most women. So she thinks she's bleeding to death. She thinks she's dying. The other women, the other girls, are aware that this is something that happens every month, and just completely rip into her because of it. They are vicious. They are absolutely vicious. Now, in the book, she's described as being slightly pudgier. She's described as having zits with bland hair. She's ridiculed by everyone at school. Even some of the teachers in the book sort of not despise her, but almost hate who she is because they feel like she should be better. She is physically and emotionally bullied by her mother as well, and this is shown in the book and the film. She's mercilessly ridiculed throughout every aspect of her life. There's no escaping from it, unfortunately. She's pitied by a lot of the teachers, but as I said before, they also, at the back of their heads, they sort of are not happy with her either. She's very naive about a lot of things because her mum doesn't tell her a lot of things. She's very naive about how everything works, but she's not stupid. She's never stupid. Now, in the film, they get that ridicule, they get that torment, they get the fact that there's no escape for her, but she's portrayed as being slimmer, and she's got clearer skin, and she's a little bit prettier. She's still quite bland. I don't want to say anything bad about the actress, but she's still portrayed as quite bland, because obviously she's supposed to be sort of like this person that people automatically will start bullying. So, and of course, she has telekinesis, which is in the book and the film. You can't have it without her having telekinesis. That's the whole plot of it. Then you come across Margaret. Now, Margaret is Carrie's mother. She is a zealot. She's a religious zealot. She believes that women only get their cycle once they've sinned with a man, or if they've thought about sinning with a man, which is, as any woman knows, and any man knows, I would hope, is completely not true in the slightest. She's described in the book as having whiting hair, a very thick body, but a very small head. So I don't know about you, but I was thinking of, in Beetlejuice with the shrunken head at the end. That's what I was kind of imagining, which obviously is not even close to how someone would look. She's considered as having sharp eyes. So eyes that sort of see everything, that sort of like are judging the very essence of who you are. She's very, very judgmental. Now, she is described as being a pariah of the town because people do not care for her. They try to look out for the daughter at the beginning, but then just wipe their hands completely of the White family. In the film, she's a little bit slimmer, she's a little bit younger, she's got darker hair. She's still the zealot, she's still emotionally abusive to Carrie, but she's just not as rotund as she's described in the book. Now, Susan Snell, she's the third character we'll be looking at. She's a semi-popular girl. She's sort of like she's in the popular crowd, but she's not fully in the popular crowd, so she doesn't follow exactly what they do. And she's going out with a handsome young man, which is Tommy. Now, she doesn't want to become the popular typical girl, and that is shown in the book very well. You get that sort of like that monologuing where she doesn't want to be the woman that was popular at high school, then went on to do nothing with her life, had loads of kids while her husband is a car mechanic. That's not what she wanted, and she does say this quite often. In the film, it's not as obvious, but it's still an underlying there because she's the one that tries to make amends when the whole thing with Carrie goes down. Now, she definitely has a conscience, and she has an understanding that what she did to Carrie is completely wrong. She doesn't understand quite why she got carried away with it. She just knows that it wasn't a nice thing to do, and she gets that, which is why she then sort of tries to push Tommy to take Carrie to the prom, and she tries to make amends because she doesn't want that to be who she is. And this is very well shown on the screen. You see this remorse, you see this backpedaling, you see this sort of inner look at who she is and who she's going to be, which I think is brilliantly done. Then you have Chris Hargensen. Now, she is your typical mean girl. She is popular, she is vicious, she is unwielding, she has a rich family, she has a dad who's a lawyer, she's going out with the bad boy. She is your typical vicious witch. And she instigates a lot of the bullying for Carrie, which, you know, it is shown in the film and the book. Now, she's very vindictive, and she hates to lose. If there's any suggestion that she's lost for whatever reason, she will go completely out of her way to thoroughly and unashamedly destroy the person that has told her that she's lost, essentially. So this makes her desperate towards the destruction of Carrie. Now, in the book, it's this slow build, and it's sort of like, even though she does want to fully destroy Carrie, I get the feeling that towards the end she doesn't quite understand exactly what she did. She still wants to destroy Carrie, but she doesn't understand quite that it's because of her that Carrie loses it, and so many people lose their lives. Because she's very entitled, so she can't see that she's in the wrong. And you see this in the film. You see not as much of the vindictiveness and not as much of the entitlement, but you do see it nonetheless, and you do get this underlying sense that she is and will always be the popular girl, and she'll probably end up with the kids while the dad's the car mechanic. So then you come across Tommy Ross. Now, Tommy Ross is one of those rare characters that is a jock. He's quite popular, but also seems to have a conscience, always seems to be like just a nice guy. And so he's described as being very handsome, and he's obviously dating Sue Snell. So he ends up asking Carrie to the prom initially because of Sue, but then you see it in the film and the book that he actually just wants her to have a good time. He wants her to realise that she's not a pariah, that she can have a nice time at school, and you see this, and you see that he's actually understanding that she's a human, and he's not just doing it to try and get in Sue's pants, because in the book he does that several times. In the film, you never see that. But he's doing that because he then realises that she is a human, and she's endured so much that he wants to make this as happy a time for her as humanely possible. And you really feel for him. And when he does die, I shed a little tear. I'm not gonna lie. I cry at a lot of things, but I shed a little tear, and I was just like, oh, you know, he was a really nice guy. I wanted him to survive, but you know he doesn't. But you still want him to come back. And I honestly feel that this has brought brilliant across to the big screen, because you sit there and you root for him. You go, he's nice, I like him. Then on the flip side, you have Billy Nolan. Now, Billy Nolan is an ass. There is no other way around it. He is a horrible piece of work. And it's hinted at in the books that if he grew up, he probably would have been a killer or a woman beater. But he would have at least ended up with a rap sheet and in prison at some point. And he's described as being a greaser. And he turns into nastier parts of what it was going to be. So initially, when Chris just wanted to humiliate Carrie, he in the book is the one that sort of decides to go for the pig's blood, and he's like, the pig's blood for the pig of a woman, and he's not even bothered by the end of the book if Carrie's the one that gets the pig's blood, or if it's another one of the people that get nominated for the Spring King and Queen. And you sort of you get this point that he's just vicious for being vicious. He's not a nice person. You know that if he made it, if he survived, you'd be hearing about him in newspapers. And you do see this in the film, but he's not as nasty in the film as he is in the book. In the book, you get this real sense of horror, but in the film, you don't get that as much. And then you get the teacher. Now, the gym teacher, Miss Desjardins, again, apologise if I say this wrong. In the book, she does pity Carrie, but she's also got a little bit of disgust towards Carrie, especially when that first women's cycle happens, because she cannot understand why Carrie doesn't know this information. And she thoroughly slaps Carrie. She says it's because she was trying to get her out of her hysterics. However, in the book, she does also say that it is partly because she was just disgusted with this girl crying and with bloody handprints on the shorts. So you also, but she's a young teacher and she takes nothing. So if Chris comes up and says, right, I'm not doing this punishment, I'm not doing it, she goes, well, this is what you're going to encounter then. And she's unapologetic about who she is, and she doesn't roll over whenever someone tries to push her around, and she makes sure that you're punished if you do wrong. So even though she was disgusted by Carrie, she also pitied her. She made sure that all the girls that took part got detention, and if they didn't turn up to the detention, then they would lose their prom ticket, and they'd get 3-day suspension. And she followed it through. She was not afraid to follow it through for anybody. And I think apart from, she seems more friendly and loving towards Carrie in the film. She seems more of an ally rather than just someone that's just looking out for her. She seems like an ally, like a friend. But apart from that, a lot of it did transpire to the film very well. Now you see lots of characters come in and out, like the school friends, like the parents, everything like that. A few of the teachers as well. And now in the book you see more of the town and more of the interactions outside of the school. But for filming purposes, they kept it mainly for the school. And it only really focuses on the school interactions and the mother. But for those that they did show on the screen, I think they did it very, very well. And I'm willing to give it a 7 out of 10. Now, as I've mentioned, it is hard to get the whole the setting. So it is hard to get the whole of the setting over. If it's sort of like set in loads of different places. But this film focused primarily on the school and focused primarily on the home. Now in the book, you see the whole of the town, which you don't really see in the film. But it is set sort of like in America around the early 70s. And you see, the way that it's presented is very well. The bits that do transcribe onto the screen are presented very well. And so with the setting, apart from the fact that they don't really show the rest of the town, I'm willing to give it a 7 out of 10. Now, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, it is very hard to get the full plot of any book onto a screen. So in this instance, they had a harder task because the book, towards the end, goes into complete and utter destruction of everything. Absolutely everything. Now, due to the restrictions of the film at the time, the film was unable to deliver the final scene of the book, the final scenes of the book. So below we will look at the similarities and the differences of the story, but we do have to admit that due to the fact that of when the film was made, it would have been very hard for them to have shown that complete and utter destruction of the town. Now, similarities. You've got the shower scene at the beginning with Carrie's first cycle and the absolute horrible, humiliating bullying that is ensued from her classmates. Now, she is rescued by the gym teacher and then sent home. And she's very naive and doesn't quite know what's happening. So because of this, it does cause more panic and fear, absolute fear in her eyes. Now, when she goes home, this is when you meet her crazy mother. And as I've said before, her mother seems to think that the woman's cycle begins because you've sinned with a boy, which I don't understand how she herself has had it, and yet this is what she believes. It's absolutely crazy. Now, in both narratives, you do see the aftermath of that scene. So you do see the detention. You see the fact that Chris loses her ticket because she doesn't go to the detention. So she's suspended for 3 days and loses her prom ticket, which is why she then decides that she's going to destroy Carrie ultimately and unashamedly. Now, when that happens as well, you do see in both narratives, you see Sue getting embarrassed and upset at her behavior. So she then pushes Tommy to ask Carrie to the prom. And this is brilliantly done in both narratives because it shows that initially she was doing it for herself, and then she realizes that she's trying to make it as unselfish as possible. And she worries that by doing this as an unselfish deed, it's selfish. So it's almost like Phoebe from Friends when she's just like, there's no, or is it Joey? One of them says that there's no unselfish deed, which really sat with me. So you do still get that. You also get the dilemma of Sue dropping out of the prom and the aftermath of that. So everybody taking the mick. And the fact that then Chris gets even more incensed because she's not going to prom, but Carrie now is. And Carrie's going with a very popular, handsome man. So you also see as well Carrie's mum and Carrie in several standoffs when Carrie is presenting the fact that she is going to prom. Now, Carrie's at this point starting to realise that she's got powers. And so she basically turns around and says to her mum that she's going. There is nothing she can say about it. She'll be home by 11:30. The boy's a really nice boy. She's making her own dress. And you see all this. You see Carrie starting to finally realise that there's more to life than what her mum says. Now, as you've got this going on, you've also got Chris, who gets her boyfriend Billy to get a way to get back at Carrie. Now, as I mentioned in the book, it sort of shows that Billy's the one that really thinks of the pig's blood, but in the film it's sort of Chris. But either way, you've still got this underlying, you know that this is going to happen, you know that Carrie's going to be humiliated, and you sit there and you almost cry for her, really, because she gets so mercilessly bullied and she wants one nice night. But it is the book. So when the prom happens, everything goes so well. In the book, you sort of get more of the prom. You get the fact that, you know, Tommy and Carrie get nominated. They almost win. It goes down to a tiebreaker. Then they win by 1 vote. They go up and the pig's blood is dropped all over Carrie. And then the bucket hits Tommy on the head and then chaos ensues from there. In the film, it's more of a landslide that Carrie and Tommy win because Chris has definitely organised it so that they'll have to be up on stage. But again, pig's blood comes down, Tommy gets knocked out, and it all hell breaks loose. Now, the difference is you see more of the torment when you see Carrie. You see more of the torment in the lead up to everything. Because in the film, it's sort of like you see that shower scene, then that's it. In the book, it's right from the very beginning, from the minute she's entered school. But you also get more of a sense of how much of a pariah Carrie and Mum are in the book than you do in the film. You see it in the film, but in the book, you realise that the townspeople have tried to look after Carrie, then just wash their hands. Now, in the book, I quite like that you get journal extracts and like a newspaper extracts and things within the narrative, that shows the run up to the event and the aftermath of the event, and it interviews people who knew Carrie, who knew Margaret, and it interviews and it tells you what happened after everything had ended, but also what could have led to it and how it could have been avoided. Which I really like, because sometimes when you look at the end of the film and you see that end, you just sort of sit there going, what about everybody else? So I do appreciate that in the book you get this aftermath as well from the survivors. Now, in the book, we're told that Margaret has a job. So it gets her out of the house. So every now and then Carrie's on her own in the house. But in the film, you don't see it. She just always seems to be around and always seems to be at home, which isn't a massive difference. But if you look at it when Carrie wants some alone time and when she comes back early from school on that day, you know, in the book, she comes home to an empty house and she's able to sort of compose herself. In the film, she comes home and Margaret's already there waiting for her. So we also get told in the books that Carrie's powers get showed at earlier points. So there's a rock shower that ended up on their house. There's been little bits here and there that you hear about and you see about. And during the book as well, you see Carrie realizing earlier on that she's got these powers, and she tries it and she flexes it and she makes herself more aware of how she can use it. In the film, it's almost sort of like she knows it's there. She doesn't really know how it works. She thinks it's just happened. And then at the end, she sort of goes all Carrie White on it. Now, the chase from Tommy to get Carrie to go to prom seems longer in the book. And in the book, he ends up, as I said before, he ends up really liking Carrie, and really appreciating her as a girl, and almost wanting her to say yes just because he wants her to have a good time, rather than initially saying yes because he wanted to please Sue. So again, that is shown well on film, but it does take longer in the book, and you see this sort of character development between them, which I think is missed a little bit. So now we come to the end. So everything else has been quite similar, but the ending, you've got in the film, Carrie gets covered in blood. She goes absolutely crazy. She locks all the doors. She traps everyone inside and she watches the destruction of the people. So you feel the tension build, because Sue, who goes to prom in the film just to see how everything goes, watches the destruction of everybody, really. But she gets chucked out before Carrie can kill her, because Carrie will have killed her. Not deliberately, but she would have died. So then in the film, Carrie heads home. She kills her mum and the house disappears into a burning pit, almost as if it's being dragged into hell, as if that's where they belong. On the way home to kill the mum, she encounters Chris and Billy, who try and run her over, and she just flips the car and kills them. Done. Then the film ends with Sue waking up from a nightmare after she's seen the hand of Carrie come out and grab her. So it's sort of like you see that and you're just like, that is crazy. But then the book goes further. So in the book, you see the fact that she tries to run from the prom initially. She doesn't try to kill everyone. She tries to run from the prom. But someone trips her up. She lands face first. She's covered in blood. And as she's leaving, she realizes that no, she's not going to take this anymore. So she goes back. She locks all the doors. And then she starts killing the people inside. Not one by one. She just has water running and then electricity going. And then everything starts burning. So she decides to make them pay. So she destroys the school. So that's completely done. But then as she goes home, as she makes her way home, she destroys and kills so many people. So she empties all the fire hydrants along her way so that nobody can put out the fires that she starts. She blows up gas stations. She brings down live electric wires to electrocute people. And she burns down half the neighborhood. And she slowly rains destruction down everywhere she goes as she's making her way home. So she makes her way home to get comfort from her mum. Her mum doesn't give her comfort. Her mum tries to kill her. So her mum stabs her. She then kills her mum. And then she realizes that she's got nobody, got nowhere. So she heads out again. And as she's heading out again, she encounters Chris and Billy, and she kills Chris and Billy. So then as she's going on, she's killed Chris and Billy, but as she's dying, she sort of drags, she sends out like this almost like this call that someone should come and hear her and listen and be with her as she dies. And Sue gets that pull to go to her side. And as she goes to Carrie's side, she feels what Carrie's feeling in those last moments and throughout her life. And it destroys Sue a little bit because she realizes what Carrie has actually been through. So throughout the whole of the destruction of the town and the school, everyone is aware that it's Carrie, even though they don't see her. Some people don't even see her, they just know it's her. Some people don't even know who she is, they just know she's the daughter of Margaret White. But it's just it's this telekinesis power that's going out, that's saying that you have done this to me and I am now doing this to you. And it is thoroughly an enjoyable book, and it is a very good enjoyable film. Now, I understand why the film cut off when it did and it didn't do that final destruction, because it was due to this big difference in that final scene, those final chapters, and the fact that it doesn't really show the aftermath as much, and it doesn't really show the sort of like the run up as much. I'm willing to give this a 6 out of 10. The overall plot gets a 6 out of 10. Now, the film is a very good film in its own right. You don't need to know the source material. And honestly, for the time that it was made, it captures the horror of the story absolutely brilliantly. I will thoroughly enjoy this film and I will watch it again. It is one of those films that I don't know if Stephen King likes the adaptation of the book to the film, but I loved it. And I love the fact that the film stands in its own right. So I will give it an 8 out of 10. So now we're coming to the final part. Now, as I've mentioned before, the end of the film is vastly different to the pure and utter death and destruction that you come across in the book. And the main reason is for costs back then. That was one of the main reasons. They were unable to really blow up an entire town, and there was no really way that they could do it and still make it seem like it was real. And they understood that, and they understood what their problems were. So they stuck with what they had. That and a few of the differences in way the story is told. So, it makes my final mark overall, with everything taken into consideration, I'll give it a final mark out of 6 out of 10. Now, as I say every time, this is my own opinion, of course. If you have any other different opinions or different insights, leave it below in the comments. Click subscribe and like, and then you'll get to know every time a new video comes out. We do try and get a video out every Wednesday. And next week's episode, we'll be looking at the thriller and the horror that is Woman in Black by Susan Hill. So until then, that is the end of my episode of The Contented Narrative, and remember to always keep it contento.